Did you know that a front lot less than 450 square metres in area or a rear lot less than 600 square metres in area, excluding the access handle, is technically defined as a small lot? Did you also note that the planning scheme, so the council rulebook, is written in a way to significantly reduce the extent or the size of the houses that you can build on small lots? Well, a couple of weeks ago, we did a video that talked all about the small lot requirements. So we talked about the fact that you had three different options. Option number one was to utilise the exemptions to bypass town planning. Option number two was to comply with the acceptable outcomes to do what we commonly refer to as self-assessment. And option three was to go through the town planning process. In that video in particular, we talked all about option number one, the exemptions, the fun stuff. Today's video, we're going to focus on option number two, and we're going to talk all about the acceptable outcomes. So what you can essentially do under the self-assessable process. If that sounds like it's something that interests you, stick around. Okay, so before we dive into talking about what the acceptable outcomes are, or the key acceptable outcomes, probably should stop and explain what my pretty little drawing here is trying to show, because I'm the first to admit I'm not good at drawing. Okay, so what we've got here, the orange outline, is meant to represent the property boundaries. We've got the road down here, so that's the front boundary, the rear boundary, and then the two side boundaries. What I've tried to show is the purple little house there with a nice little pyramid roof form. And then we've got the pink extension coming off the rear, and then also the pink extension extending, you know what I'm trying to say, to the side. Now that I've set the context, let's dive in. First one, this is probably the one that catches most people out, site cover. Now, it is a sliding scale. Let me just write this down. Okay, so let me explain that. When you have a block that is 400 to 450 square metres in area, your maximum site cover limit, so your building footprint limit, is 50%. So another way I like to describe that is essentially roof area to ground area. Now, as your block gets smaller and smaller, that site cover limit goes higher and higher. It increases essentially. So 300 to 400 square metre blocks can go 60%. 200 to 300 square metre blocks can go 70%. You get the idea. So yes, as you get smaller, the expectation is that your house can get bigger in ratio, in respect. What am I trying to say here? The proportion of roof form to ground area can increase. That's what I was trying to say. Okay, what are we going to do next? Let's talk about, this is another one that gets people all the time. Your maximum building length from the front of the building to the outermost projection at the rear, so the OMP at the front to the OMP at the rear, cannot exceed 25 metres. Now, eaves are excluded from that. So typically it's a measurement, if you have a veranda going along the front of the house, it's a measurement from the balustrade on the front veranda. And if you happen to have a veranda on the back, balustrade at the back. If you happen to have stairs at the front, stairs at the back, it's to the end of the stairs or the edges of the stairs. Now, I probably should clarify that. We did a post on this a couple of weeks ago too. Under the old rulebook, stairs were exempt when it came to small lots. So you could often exclude that, or not often, you could exclude that from the total building length calculation. These days, unfortunately, they're not excluded, so you do need to count them. We've literally got a job at the moment where, actually I'll talk about that later when we get to rear setbacks, because that's a great example for that one. Okay, so we got 25 metre building length. Now, next, crossover width. So your crossover is essentially the portion of driveway between the curb and the property boundary. So that width, or the neck on the driveway, let's call it that. The neck on the driveway within the council portion of land, so not within your property boundary, cannot exceed 4 metres in width. It actually used to be 3 metres under the old planning scheme. So they're actually giving us a little bit more width to play with there, which is awesome. Okay, what are we going to cover next? Let's do side boundary setbacks. Generally speaking, you need to be a minimum of 1 metre from each side boundary. Now, like with the building length calculation, it's measured OMP to boundary, excluding eaves. So your eaves can encroach into that area. Now, I should probably clarify there is a difference in the measuring requirements, ways, rules, whatever word you want to use, between the town planning rulebook and the certification rulebook. So when you get to get building approval from a private certifier, they don't exclude the eaves like we do, just to complicate things. Hey, may as well keep it interesting, right? So I say the majority of the time it's 1 metre. You can have built to boundary walls for small components in certain situations or circumstances. There are way too many variables for me to sit here and actually talk through it today, so I'm not even going to bother talking about what situations or what scenarios you can actually build to the boundary. It depends on zoning, it depends on how far away the neighbour's house is, it depends on how big the neighbour's block is, all of that sort of stuff. But just keep in mind that in some situations you can do a built to boundary wall. Normally it's up to 9 metres in length, which is what people use for a garage. The rest of the block, though, needs to be 1 metre back, again, to the wall, the balustrade, whatever the OMP is, excluding the eaves. And just to clarify there again, OMP, outermost projection. Okay, what are we going to do next? Let's do the good old rear boundary setback. Okay, so how am I going to write this? Let me think about this. Okay, bit messy, trying to squish it in the little board that we got working for us today, but let me explain it. If your block is less than 25 metres in depth, so if the front boundary to the rear boundary is less than 25 metres, you can have 3 metres to the bottom level. I am simplifying things a little bit more here, and 4.5 metres to the top level. Now there is certain height requirements there, but if we just, for simplicity's sake today, I'm just going to say 3 metres to the bottom level, 4.5 to the top level. And again, that's measured from the boundary to the outermost projection, excluding eaves. Now, if your block is more than 25 metres in depth, so if the measurement between the front boundary and the rear boundary is greater than 25, you need to be 6 metres off the boundary. Now, the stair example I was going to use before, great example to use here. We've got a property at West End at the moment that we're about to lodge an application for. Under the old scheme, again, stairs are exempt. So the building designers go, oh yeah, we'll just put some stairs on the back there. It makes no difference to us. What we've worked out is that the very last tread on that stair, so the very last step on that staircase, encroaches into the 6 metre rear setback. Oh, I was just looking at going, oh, could it be any closer? My goodness. So yes, unfortunately we don't comply with the acceptable outcomes, which means we bump ourselves down into that third option I mentioned earlier on, which means we lodge an application. There's other reasons we're lodging an application for that one. If it had just been the stairs, I would have gone, hey guys, look, do you just want to trim your stairs back or have your stairs going sideways or do something with those stairs so that you can avoid the town planning application? But because we're doing a DA for everything else, may as well just throw it in there. It makes no difference, not going to impact on anyone. Okay, now we've talked about the rear, let's talk about the front. Now this one's a hard one to explain. Let's just quite simply go 3 to 6 metres. So what you need to do is you need to work out what your neighbour's front setbacks are. So you work out which one of your neighbours is closest to the front boundary. You can go as far forward as that neighbour unless they're within 3 metres of the front boundary. If they are within 3 metres, which you typically get in areas like West End, you have to stop at 3 metres. Any new work cannot go closer than 3 metres to the boundary. If your neighbours are, let's say 5 metres, you have to start at 5 metres or back. If they're 6 metres, you start 6 metres or back. If they're 7 metres, you can come to 6 metres. So essentially your minimum requirement needs to be between 3 and 6 metres depending on your neighbours. I might just recap that one because it's a bit of a mouthful. Essentially, work out where your neighbours are, come as far forward as them. If they're closer than 3 metres, you stop at 3 metres. If they're further back than 6 metres, you can come as far forward as 6 metres. Hopefully that makes sense now. Now, let's go height. Okay, there's a few different requirements at play here. Let me just write them all down. Okay, so stories. You're limited to a maximum height of 2 stories. So that's at any one point. We did do a video on this topic middle of last year, I think it was, where we talked about how you actually calculate stories. But basically, you could have 4 levels if you like, but you need to make sure no more than 2 of those levels overlap at any one point to make sure you do not exceed 2 stories at any point on the property. Now, roof peak, peak, you get what I'm trying to say. You need to make sure you don't exceed 9.5 metres in height. Wall height, you need to make sure your side and rear walls do not exceed 7.5 metres in height. Now, again, did a video towards the end of, or no, I think it was towards the middle of last year, actually. You'll find it, you'll work it out. Go to our video tab, have a look there, which actually talks about how to calculate those height limits. It talks specifically about the 9.5, but you can apply the same thought process and methodology to the 7.5 limit. Okay, so I think that covers all the key rules. There are a heap of other rules, like you've got to recess your garage 1 metre from the front of the house if it's a double garage, blah, 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 blah. But they're the key ones that come up on each and every job that you need to consider. So, now there was a point I was going to make. What was my point? I was talking about the acceptable outcomes. You can lodge an application. Oh, that's the key point I want to make. What we're talking about here today is just small lot rules. If your property is affected by the traditional building character overlay, any of the other problematic overlays, any of the really problematic neighbourhood plans, they introduce a whole different world of rules and requirements. Like I said, today we're just talking about the rules and requirements that apply to small lots. I think that covers everything now. Now, if you have a question, I would strongly encourage you to add it below. I can pretty much guarantee if you've got a question, there is someone else watching this video at the same time that has the exact same question. And there's probably another person that maybe a week or 2 weeks down the track goes, hey, I've got that same question. So by posing your question down below, you're not only helping yourself, you're helping at least 2 other people. Come on, you can be Mr. Nice Girl, guy or girl, right? So yes, ask any questions below. We love to interact and chat with people that way. Until next time, thanks for watching.
For all you red tape lovers out there, I have one thing to say. Well, no, actually, I've got 3. Number 1, the advice provided in these videos is general in nature. It's not site-specific. You would be a silly Billy to go and make financial decisions based on this advice without first checking with the town planner. Don't be a silly Billy. Number 2, Brisbane town planning is in no way linked to Brisbane City Council. The views expressed in these videos are my own, not council's. So if you don't like them, blame me, not council. Number 3, what was my number 3? Oh yeah, the views expressed in these videos are accurate at the time of recording. If you're watching this video back 10 years from now, the views may not be so accurate. That's all.